You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of truth, a dimension of freedom, a dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Welcome to the Capitalist Corner, everybody. I'm your host, Michael Leibowitz, and all alone today, but never fear. We still have a great show for you, a lot to talk about. Please remember, super chats, super stickers, greatly appreciated. If you think what we do here on the Rational Alternative channel is worth supporting, please support us. Helps a bunch. Also, follow us on Twitch, like, share, subscribe. We are also on Spotify. Today at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I'll be alone once again, but doing Everyday Ethics. So the title of the show today is George Floyd, Classical Liberalism, Minimum Wage, and More. But George Floyd is really a symptom for a vast epistemological problem that we have, and I'll get to that in a second. But I want to just share something that I came across as we were coming on the air. So somebody that I'm friends with on Facebook, she's a girl from my town, posted this. Thank you, Jenna, for the $2. Greatly appreciated. Posted this. LGBTQ plus pride was not born of a need to celebrate being gay or trans, but our right to exist without persecution. So instead of wondering why there isn't a straight pride movement, be thankful you don't need one. Okay. I don't care whether you support gay pride or not, Gay Pride Month. That's not why I'm posting this. The first comment is here, and it's from somebody else that I know, that I've interacted with, somebody who shows no concern for evidence. So he says, why do they get a month when veterans only get a day? Seem like vets should get more than anyone. So somebody else comes in, facts, totally agree. But then somebody steps in with, veterans are celebrated many times throughout the year, but specific to your response. November is officially designated as National Veteran and Military Families Month. The entire month is dedicated to recognizing the sacrifices and contributions of military families and veterans, directly encompassing and expanding upon the traditional observance of Veterans Day on November 11th. Beyond the dedicated month, in the fall, there are several other notable periods and days specifically honoring the U.S. military and veterans throughout the year. May is National Military Appreciation Month. It's meant to honor, remember, recognize, and appreciate all military personnel, both past and present. May is also the month of military caregiver. Okay, so now one of the people who had stepped in to say, why don't veterans get a month, after just being told all of that, doesn't then say, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I'll change my view. No, he says, November isn't called Veterans Month. June is called Pride Month. I'd like to ask any LGBTQ person, if you are out with a friend, are you introduced as this is my gay, lesbian, transgender friend, and so on. My point only is that you've made a claim. Your claim is now falsified. You're shown that you're just wrong on multiple counts. And you can't just say, oh, my bad, I was wrong. No, you double down, shift goalposts, and keep arguing. This is so common. So now let's skip over to George Floyd. Now, I understand this is 6 years ago, but across my feeds, I constantly come across things that say George Floyd, by the way, George Floyd died of an overdose. By the way, George Floyd wasn't murdered, he died of an overdose. Medical examiner says George Floyd died of an overdose. New evidence says George Floyd wasn't murdered. Yada, yada. I know that's bullshit because I've actually looked into it. So the other day we were doing an episode of Everyday Ethics and talking about epistemological problems. And I noted that this George Floyd phenomenon, one of the things people say, for instance, is he had a deadly level of fentanyl in his system. Okay, first of all, you can't know that he had a deadly level of fentanyl in his system because you don't know his tolerance. I mean, that's not even a complicated thing to understand. right? I mean, it's simple. People that get out of jail, for instance, that go back to drug addictions, die of overdoses at a pretty high rate. I think I haven't. I should confess I didn't actually do a search as I normally do. I'm just well aware of people that have gotten out of prison and died, and it does seem to me at a higher rate. Check on it. But the point is that I'm making is their tolerance isn't what it used to be. They get out of prison and try to go back to their previous levels, and they end up dying. George Floyd, if he's a fentanyl addict, would have a high tolerance. And you, as a layperson, don't understand it. They also cite the medical examiner report. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a coroner. I don't know what all the lingo means. And it says he didn't receive life-threatening injuries or something to that effect. But the medical examiner ruled his death a homicide. Numerous autopsies have said it was homicide. They said he died because of the knee on his neck. I've heard it also said, well, but it was a legal technique. Radley Balco destroyed that. Thank you, Lee, by the way. I'm happy you're in a good mood today. Thank you for the $1.99 in pounds. So if the medical examiners, coroners testified that he died from the knee on his neck, and Radley Balco wrote this excellent paper showing, no, that's not how they were trained. He wasn't trained to do the technique like that, and he gets into a lot of the details. In a quick search this morning, because when I posted, somebody saw your question, Lee, I'm sorry. How are you, King? I am doing very well. I'm happy you're in a good mood today, Lee. So anyways, I got this comment on the reel. We posted a reel from the shows as we do, and the reel was me talking about how people still believe George Floyd died of an overdose because, that's the information that they're getting. So $5 super sticker from Nicole Hingle. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure that I want to get this and I want to share some of the things. So I go to Claude. I ask Claude, Claude, what did the coroner, autopsy, and doctor who testified at Derek Chauvin's trial rule as the cause of death? Bottom line, the official autopsy ruling was homicide. Now, these people are claiming, no, the doctor said he didn't die from that. He died of an overdose. That's what the claim. The doctor. Okay. The official autopsy ruling was homicide by cardiopulmonary arrest during law enforcement restraint and neck compression. A finding Baker, the coroner, stood by throughout his testimony. There is disagreement over the mechanism that prosecution experts emphasize, whether it be asphyxia or heart disease, pre-existing things. Now, it's true, I guess, that his drug intoxication and pre-existing heart disease contribute, but that doesn't matter if they contribute. But the folks that I'm talking about seem to really think it does. So, Gemini. Medical experts and autopsies ruled that George Floyd's death was a homicide caused by cardiopulmonary arrest triggered by law enforcement subdural restraint and neck progression. Pathologists concluded that sustained pressure cut off his oxygen, directly resulting in fatal asphyxia. ChatGPT. Hold on. Official autopsy conducted by Hennepin County Medical Examiner Office ruled George Floyd's death a homicide. An independent autopsy commissioned by Floyd's family also ruled the death a homicide, but described the death as asphyxia due to sustained pressure. Also, Grok, official autopsy, quotes it again, cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdural restraint and neck compression. Okay, Fox News, Chauvin trial, medical examiner who performed autopsy said police pressure was more than Floyd can take. Now, Jonathan McWhorter and, what's his name? I think John Lowry. Let me make sure I get his name right. Jonathan McWhorter, Glenn Lowry, I'm sorry. They initially did an episode of a show where they had watched Minnesota fall, or Minneapolis falling, or some such thing. It was a documentary. The Fall of Minneapolis, it was called. And this made a lot of claims about George Floyd, and they initially bought into it. When they read what Radley Balco had to say, however, they reversed course and did what men of intellectual integrity do and admitted they were wrong. Lowry more so than McWhorter. Anyways, so in response to my post, and after I corrected the record and I, shared various articles, various sources, nobody then says, "Oh wow, you were right. I'm sorry, I was wrong." So this guy says, I got to get the post. I hate how they on Facebook, by the way, restrict the things you got to do as a specific click and stuff to find out what you are, to see all the results. So this one guy says the doctor's own words during the trial are that Floyd's heart condition and drugs contributed to his death while being arrested. That's not exactly a homicide when a healthy person wouldn't have died. It's irrelevant, dude. So this other guy tells him, he comes in and says, George Floyd's official cause of death was cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement's subdual restraint and neck compression. In other words, he would not have died if the police had not restrained him the way he did. The guy then responds, yes, I know what the report said. Critical thinking being used still doesn't make it a homicide. So first he says the doctor said that it was not, he wasn't killed. Then when another guy comes in and tells him, look, this is what the autopsy report says, he sticks to his guns. This is a problem when you can't admit you're wrong. When confronted with evidence, you just stick to your guns and say, no, this is what it is. This is what's what. Now, I'm hoping Persephone posts, as she normally does. She's busy today. If she doesn't get the chance, maybe she'll do it tomorrow. All the articles that were used in the research for this episode. So the last one that I want to get to that had to do with this is I asked Gemini, how did Newsmax and Fox cover this? Because this morning as I was doing research, I came across an abundance of Newsmax articles and Fox and saw that what they were saying was different. So according to Gemini, and this summarizes the other articles, and they, I think, post links here that you can go find. But anyways, they said Newsmax covered the death of Floyd and the subsequent trial of Derek Chauvin by largely framing the events through a critical lens focused on the Black Lives Matter movement, alleged jury intimidation, and the justice system. The network often minimized direct, continuous coverage in favor of discussions questioning the fairness of the proceedings. Hold on here. Following the guilty verdict, the former officer Derek Chauvin, Newsmax host, suggested Chauvin had been sacrificed to the mob. They argued that the trial was not fair. They argued that the jury was intimidated. They didn't focus on empathy for victims. They chose to offer less airtime compared to other networks. They heavily focused on the unrest of the events. Now, what about Fox? Let's see. Fox News coverage of the death of George Floyd and the subsequent protests was heavily polarized, with news reporting often focusing on the ensuing riots, property damage, and the perceived threat of left-wing groups, while opinion hosts frequently questioned the circumstances of his death. So, if you are doing nothing but watching Fox News, Newsmax, and listening to right-wing pundits, you're going to come to certain conclusions. And, it's incumbent upon all of us to actually do research and look further than what our first news site tells us or our preferred news site tells us. So my first piece of information was watching what occurred on tape. On its face, it looked inappropriate. Doesn't mean it was, right? Doesn't mean it was. I'm just saying it seemed to be a pretty good showing that this is not what should have been done in this situation. Subsequently, autopsy reports, medical testimony, jury trial that all found the same thing. The claims that came out about how that Chauvin was trained like that, Radley Balco destroyed it, utterly destroyed the idea that he was trained to do this. It was bullshit. Right? Aside from that, when people say things like, given that there were contributory factors, this couldn't have been a homicide. That doesn't matter. If there's an old woman walking down the street and she has her cane and an oxygen tank, and somebody runs by and knocks her to the ground to take her purse and she died, it's homicide. It doesn't make a difference. You cannot turn around and say, oh my God, but she was old and fragile. It doesn't matter. Right? I don't know. And then, like I said, the idea, well, the fentanyl killed him. You can't have that much fentanyl. It's like, I don't even need to read an autopsy report. I don't need to hear a single medical expert to know that people differ in tolerance to drugs. But and of course, they just started insulting me, telling me how stupid I am, in the comments. They said, I've read the autopsy report. Yeah, you got a fucking third grade reading level, dude. What do you want from me? This is a technical medical report that you're not trained to read. Matt Walsh says it's something, so you're going around saying, yes, it is. You're the dum-dum, not me. Yes, Ben Shapiro pushed it. Charlie Kirk pushed it. And the thing is why? Why? Why are they so wrapped up in this? Why do they have to show that this cop didn't kill this guy? Do you think that cops are somehow flawless? That they are every one and the same are perfect human beings? That are not capable of error, not capable of anger, not capable of malice? I mean, it's just, come on, guys. I know when I went to court, when I went to trial, I was guilty. The cops lied on the stand. There was a cop on the stand who said that he put a stack of quarters on the table and told me I could call my lawyer, make all the calls I needed to. It never happened. And furthermore, he didn't even need to say that. It was irrelevant. There was no evidence I ever asked to call a lawyer. But nevertheless, that's what he said on the stand. It was pure bullshit. But I guess when you have to vindicate your worldview, when you have to justify an image of somehow America is, it's these progressives that are just ruining everything, we're this great, great country, all our law enforcement is wonderful, then you have to uphold it. Interestingly, when the law enforcement goes after the right-wing personalities, Donald Trump, or what's his name there, Steve Bannon, Roger Stone. Now, look at the corruption. Look at all the corruption. Oh my God. So when they go after the black guy, when black people claim racism, they're playing the victim. But when they go after Trump or they go after Bannon, now they're corrupt. You can't have it both ways, people. You just can't. But again, the bigger point is epistemological. If we are ever going to have any semblance of sanity, we need to be able to think critically, use multiple sources, discern credible sources from not credible sources, and also just admit when we're wrong. We make errors. We're not infallible. You don't have to double down. And by the way, calling me a dumbass, it's not an argument. It's just not. Somebody else told me I'm just having my confirmation bias. I'm thinking to myself, dude, I argue against the people that are supposed to be aligned with me more than anybody you probably know. Confirmation bias is not my issue. It's not that I'm never susceptible to it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that is not what's happening here, and that's not something that I'm especially prone to. So, anyways, great article today, by the way, in the Daily Economy, defending classical liberalism. It's by a guy, where's his name here? Let me make sure I get it here. Adam Millsap. And he starts it off that almost 250 years ago, a group of revolutionaries published a document declaring their independence from the world's largest empire. Yes, of course, he's referring to the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence really contains the founding principles, right? That we have rights, that our rights. Now, I know they said from God, they weren't, they weren't perfect. They weren't, putting forth a philosophical treatise. But the fact that they identified that human beings have rights that don't come from government and that the only proper purpose of government is to protect those rights is astounding. He talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this is so disturbing to me because He says, today, many on both the right and the left, national conservatives and so-called progressives alike, seek to undermine the American experiment. Freaking men. He says they claim it has failed the middle class, minorities, women, and other groups. They argue that their ideas, tariffs, class warfare, and greater state control over the economy will make us safer, restore jobs, and reduce poverty. But these ideas are old, and when nations have relied on them in the past, they have faltered. And he goes on to document, the Chinese Empire, the United Kingdom and corn laws, the effects of these things, protectionism, how bad it is, class warfare. It's a goddamn shame that there's no, I'm not going to say there's no defenders. There's defenders out there of the American system. There's defenders of classical liberalism, of capitalism. But the big names out there really don't do that. Your Rome Brook is on, I think, every day. I think he has 40,000 followers compared to Dave Smith, who has hundreds of thousands. Now, Dave Smith, of course, would claim that he's advocating freedom, but he's not. He's just a dishonest nihilist. When you look at people like Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, the largest audiences, they are not promoting freedom. They are not promoting capitalism. They are not defending the American system. Fox News was supposed to be the conservative network. Nope, simping for Trump. Rush Limbaugh, when he was on, used to claim to defend capitalism. Of course, till Trump came along, then he got in line, as did Hannity and the rest of them. So where are the voices that are out there to defend the American founding, the American Constitution, individual rights, capitalism? Where are they? We're here. I do it on a daily basis, but 848 followers on a show that's a year old. We're not exactly reaching the largest audience here. Not that we never will, but I'm just talking about right now. We really do. I can't say this enough. Learning what rights are, why we have them, the importance of liberty, the benefits of capitalism, the importance of the rule of law, of written constitution, separation of powers. These are things that really need to be discussed, and we need to stick to them even when our friends go against them, even when it's somebody that we like is saying something else. We can't just fold and buy into the latest. Megan Ribbon says, neither I nor Aristotle have a lot of subscribers, just saying. Well, if Aristotle, I don't know, if Aristotle had a podcast that, he wouldn't have spoke English anyway. Maybe he would have learned it. I don't know. He's a smart guy. So the bottom line is that capitalism isn't just on the ropes. Capitalism is on life support. And we need to revive it, and we need to do so quickly. And we need to do so by recognizing its requirements, its prerequisites, its moral justification, its broader effects. We need to understand economics. It's a tall order, I get it, but a lot's on the line. A lot is on the line. There was a story today in Reason Magazine, written by a guy, by the way, that I'm interviewing next week. He wrote a book called Wrong About... let me get it right before I screw everything up. Let me make sure that I get the new book correct. The guy's name is Aaron Brown, and his new book that I'm going to be interviewing him about... He teaches statistics at New York University and at the University of California at San Diego, writes regular columns from Bloomberg and Wilmot. His new book is called Wrong Number, How to Extract Truth from a Blizzard of Quantitative Disinformation. And he talks about this new study that came out that's supposed to demonstrate the minimum wage does not cause unemployment. Now, his article is dense with figures. It's really not about whether minimum wages are harmful or not. It's about how to do statistics properly, and how when you don't properly weight things, you come up with wrong answers. And he says that you don't have a large enough sample, and he says that the studies that these relied on were very bad. But I got to thinking about the famous Alan Kruger study that was done in the 90s that purported to show that minimum wage doesn't actually cause unemployment. So let me just tell you what my view is of unemployment. What historically had. So classical economics, neoclassical economics, they had different views. Classical, it says, in summary, wages gravitate to a subsistence natural levels. Regulation is ineffective or counterproductive long term. The neoclassical school standard model predicts unemployment via supply-demand imbalance if you increase the minimum wage, with some monopsony caveats. That's just for larger firms. The Austrians, inherently coercive, it destroys voluntary contracts, harms low productivity workers by outlawing their employment. Basically, what happens with a minimum wage and what has been taught and what economists have believed the effects of minimum wage are is that whenever you raise the price of something artificially, so if you raise the price of cups, you can't see my cup. If you raise the price of cups artificially, let's say, right now this cup costs $1.50. If you raise it to $5, you're going to have less people buying it. You're also going to have more people supplying it because they think they're getting $5. So you're going to end up with an excess of it. That's the same with anything. It doesn't change because we value human beings. So if you raise the price of labor above market rates, what's going to happen? Well, you're going to end up with people wanting to buy less of it. So that's what they're going to do. So you're going to have unemployment, and plus you're going to have more people wanting to work. What do you get? You get unemployment. Now, this could be counterbalanced by an increase in the money supply, but that's only going to raise prices and make the increased minimum wage pointless anyway, and it's also going to create economic dislocations. So that's the standard view, and it's the correct view. But, people want to defeat capitalism, so they come up with a variety of ways to combat it, to make arguments against it. So I asked, I wanted to give you guys a decent description of who Alan Kruger was. Alan Kruger was a prominent Princeton University labor economist and key policymaker who served as chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Obama. He transformed empirical economics by pioneering natural experiments, applying rigorous data analysis to unconventional topics like the economics of music and terrorism. So he and David Card did a study in 1994 where they compared, there was an increase in New Jersey of the minimum wage, and there wasn't a increase that happened in Pennsylvania. And they said that relative to Pennsylvania, New Jersey actually had an increase in jobs. It says the results, contrary to conventional economic theory, they found that employment in New Jersey fast food restaurants did not decrease. In fact, it grew by roughly 13% relative to the Pennsylvania restaurant. They also found that businesses passed much of the cost increase to consumers. Now, there's been critiques on them for their survey methods. There's been critiques on the administrative data, that the time frame was too narrow. Also, there's the idea that they only studied raw employment. They didn't study labor hours. So if you're talking about the number of people employed, but if they're working less hours, that would still be a decrease in in employment. There was also a warning 2 years before the minimum wage was raised. So the idea is that perhaps these restaurants accommodated for that already. So there's a lot of problems that, and it's been shown by some, experts that no, in actuality, there was a decrease in employment. But I think that there's a couple big problems here. It didn't. Importantly, they didn't study whether it actually dropped poverty. And in another article that should be included, talked about how minimum wages don't decrease poverty, and part of the reason is because the benefits of the minimum wage don't go to poor people. Because you have a lot of teenagers working, for instance, from affluent families, middle-class families. They get them too. More of them get them than the poor. So it doesn't affect poverty either. Then there's also the problem of ceteris paribus is important in science, right? All things remaining equal. In economics, in human action, all things are not equal. There's a lot of factors going on that we can't account for. For instance, you increase the minimum wage. Okay, what's going on with the monetary system? What's going on with welfare? What's going on in the employment market more broadly? Are there other factors that could be affecting this? So just studying what happens before and after a minimum wage increase isn't going to get there. You need broad economic theory. You need to understand human behavior. And that leads to the conclusion that if you raise the minimum wage, you're going to get less people employed. I mean, there's an analogy given that it's like saying we're going to do a study to see whether water can actually go uphill. I mean, it's dumb, right? But to me, it's even broader. It's even not broader, a bigger problem. And that's that minimum wage laws have somebody stepping in and using force to prevent people from entering into contracts, both employer and employee. If I want to enter into a contract with Megan whereby I employ her and she agrees to do it for a given amount of money, who the hell is anybody to come in and threaten me and tell me that I have to pay her more? And then I say, well, okay, I'm not going to pay her. I'm not going to hire her. What can you do about that? Are you going to threaten me then too? The use of force to me is the fundamental problem. The initiation of force, the violation of the right to contract is the main problem. The economics is secondary, important, but secondary to the moral problem. There's a great quote. Let me see if I can find it here. It's, I can't remember the guy's name, but I do have the quote, so I want to share it anyway. He said, "You can make it illegal to employ a man under a certain rate of wages, but you cannot secure his employment at that rate unless the community will undertake to provide for an indefinite number of claimants work remunerated at more than its market value, in which case its action will tend to remove to a continuously increasing extent the ordinary motives to vigorous and efficient labor." Yeah, you can't make people employ people. These are bad ideas, but they keep going. Now, there's a recent study coming out of, let me find it here. I believe this is is it a Gallup poll? I think so. Let's see. Anyways, this is what the poll says. This is from the Conference Board and Business Council poll, and they found out that the CEOs of the world's biggest companies lost confidence in the economy this month as the Iran war dragged on. A new survey finds why it matters. Business leaders who lack confidence tend to pull back on hiring and investment, weighing further on the economy. CEO confidence fell 12 points in the second quarter of the year to 47 per the survey from the Conference Board, a nonpartisan think tank, and it says any number below 50 signals negative sentiment. It doesn't surprise me that CEOs would have negative sentiment. What surprises me is when they have positive sentiment. I mean, there's a lot of bad news out there. There's a lot of bad economic stuff that the government does. But, I mean, the elements of freedom, and this is controversial because you can't know counterfactuals. So in economics, you ultimately have to, a lot of times, do what the Austrians or what Mises called mental experiments, where you can psychologically hold all things equal and figure out what's causing what. Because like I said, all things don't remain equal. But I would argue, and I don't think it's a very hard argument to make, that the elements of freedom lead to prosperity. But we would be far more prosperous if we had more freedom. I think capitalism's resilient. I think people are resilient. So people are able to press forward in spite of the monstrous government restrictions that weigh on their heads. That's my take anyway. So what about the Iran war? I guess we have to talk about that a little bit. Well, we've been engaging in what they've called defensive strikes on the Iranians. I guess the Iranians are laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Now the Iranians are firing back, so that's a problem. We're still calling it a ceasefire. I don't know how it's a ceasefire when you're firing at each other, but that's not anything new. They've done that. Trump says that he's not going to rush an Iran deal. He wants to make sure it gets right. I don't know. We've talked about it enough. I mean, look, it's not a way to run a war. You just can't do it that way. You're either going to fight or you're not. This is just embarrassing. You violated the Constitution. You violated the War Powers Act, and you haven't accomplished dick. So, I mean, whatever. There's also evidence, and Axios talking about that, and I've talked about this before. The war in Iran, this is a quote, has exacerbated a shortage of missile defense weaponry that is likely to plague the U.S. and its partners for years to come. The conflict is draining weapon stockpiles far faster than American factories can replace them. That's not good. So it's just on the Iran war front, bad news. And now there's an article from Reason Magazine. The article is entitled, "Does Reporting Bad News About the Iran War Make You a Foreign Agent?" And I guess the Trump administration invokes this notoriously vague FARA to threaten a critic. So this journalist, Tim Miller from The Bulwark, shared someone else's paraphrase of an Iranian TV news report about the ceasefire negotiations. And the official White House rapid response account says that Miller, the reporter, is starting to take Iranian state media as fact and peddle disinformation on their behalf. Maybe Tim should register under FARA for being an agent of a foreign country. No. He should not. And this is another problem with war. With war come assaults on freedoms, assaults on our freedoms, assaults on the freedom of the press. When war was just theoretical, and I used to talk about it, and I don't consider myself a dove by any stretch of the imagination. I really don't. I just think that you need to be honest, and we need to understand what we're getting into. For instance, we need to understand what the Constitution provides, what the risks of violating it are, what the War Powers Resolution says, what the risks of violating that are in terms of erosion of the rule of law or erosion on citizen, the confidence of the populace, the legitimacy of the government. That's all important. You also need to factor in things like we talked about, I think, yesterday or the day before, maybe it was the day before yesterday, the unknowns, things you can't know that are going to affect. For instance, what's the population of Iran going to do? What are the surrounding countries going to do? What's the effect on our missile program? You have to ask, are other countries going to get stronger because of this? There's also, how long is it going to take? Do we have goals? What's the government going to do here at home in terms of violations of free speech, for instance, wanting to, designate people as foreign agents for their reporting, or prices of gas going up, or other prices of fertilizer that may be on the rise too that they're talking about. You have to know all of these things. Not that you have to know each one, how it's going to turn out, but you have to be willing to think about them and factor them in and understand they're part of the equation when you're going to go to war. And you have to weigh your uncertainty against what your goals in the war are. So when you go to war with a country like Iran, right, we've got no declaration of war. We've got violation of the War Powers Act. We have multiple different explanations of what's coming. We have who knows how many claims of victory already, right? How would we even measure victory at this point? And then you weigh that what are our goals? None. And then what would have been the cost? 13 or 15 dead Americans that we know of, massive losses of missiles, erosion of credibility with our allies. Our enemies are thinking, Jesus, this guy keeps threatening and threatening, but doesn't do shit about it. I mean, you have to take that stuff into consideration. And, well, a lot of people don't. I don't know why. But anyways, Marabin said, love the research you did on economic growth yesterday. Well, thank you, Megan. It's very, very nice of you. And thank you for the $2. Really, really appreciate that. She says, can you do a deep dive projecting what that kind of growth would look like today? I could. I don't know. For how long of a period do you want to do, Megan? Oh, you want to know if the United States grew, if it was comparable growth today, what would it look like? I don't know if you can actually do that. I mean, I'm not an econometrician, I should say. So I don't know, but I suppose we can try, right? It's not as if I have enough to do already, because in Saturday, Megan's back on the Capitalist Corner Weekend Edition, where we're going to be discussing more education. We're doing a great series with that. I'm very happy to have Megan on. Megan's a great addition to the channel. The channel, by the way, is the Rational Alternative channel. This particular show is the Capitalist Corner. But on the Rational Alternative channel, we have this. We also have Everyday Ethics, which I'll be doing at 2:30 p.m. today. We also have Crime, Corrections, and Culture, which we do 3:15 p.m. Eastern on Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Today we're off because my co-host is busy, but in producer, so we're going to take the day off from that. But that's what we do. We also have the weekend show. We've got more shows coming down the pike, and there's also, if you get a membership to the channel, there's a lot of special content over there as well, and more to come. All right, look, folks, I'm 40 minutes into this thing, and I'm all alone. You got to come with some questions. You come with some questions, I'll see if I can come with some answers. I can tell you, let me just tell you what I'm looking forward to discussing today on the on Everyday Ethics at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on this channel. What I'm looking forward, what I'm going to discuss, I came across this survey from Gallup, and it says that charted new moral low, share of Americans who say the state of moral values is poor. A record high 56% of Americans say moral values in the U.S. are poor, according to Gallup. A Gallup poll out this morning. That's up 12 points from last year. 80% say moral values are getting worse. That's 14 points higher. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion about that 2:30 today on Everyday Ethics. Any questions? The screen just clicked, but I forgot to tell. Gee, sometimes I think I'd forget my head if it wasn't attached. Right now on the Rational Egoist channel, the Rational Egoist podcast, we got a great episode. I did the episode. There were three of us. It was myself, and it was also Professor Andrew Bernstein and Professor Dr. Nikos Soterakopoulos. We reviewed the novel Shane. We discussed its implications for heroism. Really, really good discussion the three of us had. I'm looking forward to getting together with those guys for another discussion. That was phenomenal. So you got to check that out. Rational Egoist podcast. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. Great episode. Great discussion. If you're looking for inspiration, some intellectual fuel, I highly recommend checking it out. We had 2 PhDs and this old ex-convict, and I think we had a rather nice discussion. I don't remember, folks, what question was asked yesterday, but I'm going to go and find it. The end of the program question. Let me just tap in over here and see. We're up to 858 subscribers. We're moving in on 1,000. I can't wait to hit that milestone. That will be great. Great. So yesterday the question was, can the Republican Party be redeemed as a fighter for freedom? Ian Gilmore says the Republican Party could recover from the MAGA nightmare, but I don't think it will. The independent-minded people have left the party or given up their independence and bent the knee. I suspect that after Trump is out of office, he will still have influence because he won't shut up and people will fear to go against his legacy. Ian, I think you are probably correct. And Kira Felix said about Trump, he's not going to last much. Remember, he's the oldest president. The future of the Republican Party is at the very least J.D. Vance. So we're probably going to hear a lot of people talking about Trump as if he were a Ronald Reagan type, because the GOP is going to get much worse. All right, audience. Listen, I gave you the opportunity to ask questions, to challenge me, argue with me, anything. You don't seem very interested. I've gone through the material. Maybe I need to get more material. But the problem is if I get more material and then I end up with co-hosts, then we don't get to all the material. And they get mad at me well, they don't really get mad at me, but you know what I mean. I give them so much to read and then they get, So, I mean, let me just tell you real quickly. Let me see how many articles. I sent them to Persephone anyway so that she can post them. So the articles today 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 20, 23 articles today. I sent to Persephone. I do my research. What can I say? All right. What could be the capitalist thought of the day? Capitalist thought of the day, the importance of reason. Ayn Rand once said that fundamentally she was an advocate of reason, and that is very important, and it's a very important clue. Because while reason can be looked at, I think, as both the cause of advocating for capitalism, it also is the effect of being free to think. If we don't have freedom, we are not free to think. But if we don't use reason, we cannot advocate for capitalism. So what we need to do is learn to think properly, learn to identify and integrate the material provided by our senses in a logical fashion, learn to think critically, learn to assess sources, learn to admit that when we are wrong, it's okay. That's the type of things that we need to do. We need to make our arguments. We need to demonstrate the moral superiority of capitalism. We have to argue that it rests on the individual rights of man, and that the proper purpose of government is to protect those rights, that initiating force is evil, and that capitalism is the only system that ultimately allows us to be free. We need to push that, push it, and push it again. That has to be our message. Okay, what can be the question? What can I ask? What can I ask? What can I ask? I've asked this before, but I'll ask it again. What topic or what story in the news do you think we're missing on this show that we're not discussing that you would like to see discussed? What would you like to see us discuss that we have not been discussing? Please go to YouTube and answer the question. It helps with the algorithm. Also, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. That would be awesome. And don't forget to join me today, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, for Everyday Ethics. I think it's going to be a great discussion. That takes place on this channel, the Rational Alternative channel. The show is Everyday Ethics, and it will be great. Like Tony the Tiger. Not my best impression. Who cares? Either way, folks, if you don't join us for Everyday Ethics, please come back here tomorrow. Mark Pellegrino will be back tomorrow for the Capitalist Corner at 12 noon Eastern Time, 9 Pacific. Until then, please remember to always check your premises. Peace.